Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Corombos of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, so glad you're with us for the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. All good martinis for you today. And Jim, we're starting to record here a little bit before noon on Monday. Donald Trump's been president for a week. It doesn't feel like Donald Trump's been president for a week. A lot has changed in the last 7 days, wouldn't you say?
Greg, my nagging fear is that we are recording this around midday, a little bit late morning on Monday. People will hear it when it's all up and outloaded and gets into their podcast machines. People might be like, "What trade thing with Colombia? I missed it." The news cycle is moving so fast. It's like we're on fast forward. And so things that seem like a really big deal may not seem like a big deal. That's how fast things are going.
No, it's incredible. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the very brief trade war with Colombia yesterday. We're going to be talking about something we already knew, but the new Trump administration has basically confirmed as it relates to COVID. And then what seems now like about a month ago, Trump's visit to LA, which was just on Friday, dealing with the aftermath of the wildfires there. But let's dive into what happened yesterday. It's Sunday yesterday, and apparently word comes to Donald Trump that the Colombian government is not going to accept flights of military planes of criminal illegals who were originally from Colombia back to Colombia. That was not a smart move. Donald Trump then posts, while he's golfing, mind you, "I was just informed that 2 repatriation flights from the United States with a large number of illegal criminals were not allowed to land in Colombia. This order was given by Colombia's socialist president, who is already very unpopular among his people. His denial of these flights has jeopardized the national security and public safety of the United States. So I've directed my administration to immediately do the following: emergency 25% tariffs on all goods coming into the U.S. If there's no progress with the repatriation, that's going to 50 in a week. Travel ban and immediate visa revocations for the Colombian government officials, their allies and supporters, visa sanctions, enhanced customs and border protection on all Colombian nationals and cargo." And he says this is just the beginning. And so in the next few minutes, a lot of libs are saying, "Oh, smart move. Now coffee's going to get more expensive. Oh, and a lot of flowers come from Colombia." Everybody had this flower talking point immediately somehow. Great move right before Valentine's Day. But before they can even start tracking their likes, the Colombian president's like, "You know what? Actually, I'm going to send my own plane to pick up these people and bring them home." Then after that, Jim, there was a little bit of back and forth where the Colombian president tried to salvage his dignity a little bit by threatening sanctions in reply and saying he didn't really want to travel to the U.S. anyway. And anyway, by the evening, the statement from Caroline Leavitt says the government of Colombia has agreed to all of President Trump's terms, including the unrestricted acceptance of all illegal aliens from Colombia returned from the United States, including on military aircraft. So kind of dizzying to get your head around, especially while you're trying to watch championship football yesterday, but very quick resolution, it would seem.
Greg, my first thought was coffee is becoming a dangerous business. That's a quote from Clear and Present Danger. For listeners, I'll put it to you, Greg. What was your favorite minute of the crisis? That I think everyone's going to say simultaneously every liberal Twitter user, X user, blogger, etc., suddenly jumping out and saying, "Look what's going to do to our coffee and to our carnations and all the other flowers." No, Mrs. Garrity gets roses on Valentine's Day. Which, like that, that would have been bad. I mean, if you think, Americans were like willing to start a war over a tax on tea, imagine what we would do over coffee, right? But nonetheless, so it was like, so you can send us the original position, as I understand it, was you can send us these people who are illegally entered your country, but you can't do it on a military plane.
Yeah.
Apparently it's inhumane. Apparently it's bad. It's, we do send U.S. troops on those things, right? I mean,
that's right.
Good enough for our servicemen. You kind of figure, and worth noting, we're landing the planes and everything. It's not like we're pushing them out and saying with a parachute and saying, "Good luck. Hope you hit something, soft when you land." So it does sound like this was this is not the time to push your luck with the Trump administration. Maybe Trump will mellow out over time, but for now, he is very eager to throw his weight around. He is very eager to demonstrate that he is dictating terms, that he's not in the mood to negotiate. And so we had this bizarre situation, which it sounds like the Colombians backed down pretty darn fast. But Gustavo Petro which, let's face it, Greg, if you and I were making another Die Hard sequel and it took place in Central America, that's the name we would give the foreign dictator. So he gives this very long rant, and you run it through the translation in Spanish, and you find out that he is a fan of Walt Whitman, Paul Simon, and Noam Chomsky. I rarely do this, but a friend of mine sent me a response that is so darn funny, I have to quote it pretty much in its entirety. Well, I'll give you just the excerpts. This is the most cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs things I've read from a politician in a while. This is a man who's prepared to die to protect the good things in life, like at least half of Simon and Garfunkel, and he won't be intimidated by Trump. Of course, shortly after this, he backed down on the immigration issue, but I bet he's continuing to defiantly play the sound of silence and exporting corn to developing countries. So take that, Donnie. This is what happens when populists fight. You know, this sense of like, oh, you think you're the tough guy. Let me show you how I'm the tough guy. And they got these long social media rants. But in the end, when it's policy and it could actually hurt, citizens of both countries, everybody gets very reasonable very quickly.
Fascinating to watch, first of all, the left immediately side with the Colombian government when we're trying to send back criminals and get those criminals out of the country. That still boggles my mind. The other thing is, if there was just a miscommunication over the type of aircraft, which is still weird, maybe that could have been done without going public with everything. But there is an upside to going public because there's a lot of other leaders in Latin America, including the leader of Honduras and other places, who are trying to flex their muscles saying, well, if you try to send all these people back, maybe we're just going to have to make things a little different on our other arrangements. Now that the Colombian president has been seen to be humiliated like this in public, it might be a warning sign to some of these other folks. You might not want to play hardball right now.
As I understand it, wasn't the State Department announced they were taking moves to shut down the embassy in Bogota or vastly restrict operations there? Like it's not just Trump getting on in the first term. Trump would jump on Twitter, and then it was called Twitter, and he would say things, and not always you would see them carried out. Look, one of the advantages of Trump having the cabinet that is in its process of getting confirmed through the Senate is that you have people who actually who aren't going to drag their feet on this, and who are at least willing to publicly announce, okay, as of Monday, operations at our embassy are going to change. And, the consequences come in a lot faster. So, look, if this ends with, the Colombians taking everyone they're supposed to take, and no additional tariffs get put in place in either direction, and everybody's coffee is, I was going to say, no more expensive than it currently is, then we're all going to be fine and, sufficiently caffeinated in the morning.
Yeah, good point. Kristi Noem's on the job now at DHS. You know what she'll do if she doesn't think that you're being helpful.
Just don't complain to her that your dogs are barking.
All right, Jim, on to our second good martini today. And late last week, I think it was on Thursday, we were talking about how the Democrats, for a while, were trying to slow play, and I think they still are, Trump cabinet nominees. But ultimately, a number of them have gotten through since that conversation. 3, in fact: John Ratcliffe at CIA, Pete Hegseth, although it took a tie-breaking vote from J.D. Vance to make him defense secretary. And then, as we just mentioned, Kristi Noem was confirmed on Saturday for Homeland Security. But John Ratcliffe passes easily. I think he had well north of 70 confirmation votes. Jim, I don't think the family pictures are in the office yet. I don't think he's got the artwork on the wall. He might even have the nameplate on the door. And already he is confirming that you were right and the Biden administration was deceiving us by lack of information, if nothing else, over most of the last couple of years. But certainly the narrative we were getting from Dr. Fauci and the mainstream media carrying his water in 2020 and even 2021, basically the CIA believes that the most likely scenario for the outbreak of COVID-19, shocker of all shocks, was a lab leak in Wuhan, China.
Well, we should clarify, Greg, that it's a new assessment, not based on any new information, but it is based on a closer look at the conditions in the high security labs in Wuhan before the outbreak, and concluding that, yes, it's more likely that it's a lab leak than natural origin. To which I say, welcome to the party, pal! I've been itching to say that for a very long time. Now, because this is not really based on any new data, and it was kind of fun today's Morning Jolt going through really what's coming up on 5 years worth of writing about this.
Yeah.
And just kind of recognizing that it was back in the early days of the Biden administration. Early summer 2021, they offered the classified version, which was basically 2 pages, or the summary. And then they declassified the whole report. It was 18 pages. And I remember being infuriated by that. Because first of all, And people who have read the Dangerous Click series, and the high esteem in which I hold many people in the intelligence community. You've been to my Christmas parties. You know how many of my, friends and associates work in that world. And all of them have always told me, that they see the job as telling it straight to the president, whether the president wants to hear it, whether the president doesn't want, or congressmen, all lawmakers. Their job is to inform policymakers and decisions, say, look, this is our best assessment of what happened. You would think, hey, this whole pandemic that killed at least 7 million people around the world, more than 1 million Americans, 25 million people once you throw in all the pneumonia deaths and things like that from other countries. Figuring out why that happened, you'd think would be a really important job. You think it would be really, maybe track the North Koreans, maybe there's competing high-level interests, but figuring out why did this happen? The biggest global catastrophe of modern history. Why did this happen? You'd think that'd be a really high priority. And back in late 2021, when the U.S. intelligence community gave that full 18-page report, I wrote at the time that it really felt like they were bending over backwards to not point to the lab leak and coming up with we don't know, boss. Sorry, can't tell you. Can't narrow it down one way or the other. They seemed to accept it was entirely coincidental that this, natural origin that somebody would have had encountered with a bat, caught the virus, then gone to Wuhan, because remember, the bats aren't native to Wuhan. And then they would walk around the wet market or something like that, and then it would spread and it would take off just right down the street from not one, but 2 labs where they were doing gain-of-function research on coronaviruses found in bats. And oh, by the way, the Chinese have never found that exact strain in a bat in the wild. Down in Laos, I think they found some that were kind of similar. But so here's the thing. You've got this natural, look, people get viruses from bats on a fairly regular basis, although previous research by the Wuhan Institute of Virology had determined that it's actually hard to pick up a virus from a bat. They had encountered people back in the villages closer to this mine shaft where these bats were the most close naturally occurring virus to COVID-19, or I'm sorry, SARS-CoV-2. That's where it was, the closest natural connection there was. And they looked around and they figured out that actually a whole bunch of people, including some who'd handled dead bats, 4 of them out of like 200 people they checked had caught viruses from bats. So you look at that, you're like, okay, most bat viruses spread very quickly amongst bats. In SARS-CoV-2, we have a virus that we can't find in any bat, but we find it spreading like wildfire through humans. So it's almost like at some point it had been a bat virus, but somewhere along the way, Greg, it's like it gained a function, almost like somebody had been experimenting with it, trying to get it to be more virulent and trying to get it to be more deadly and spread quicker. And oh, by the way, one that was designed to spread amongst human beings, not spread amongst bats. All right. So I look at all this stuff and, listeners are probably sick of me ranting and raving about this. But the original CIA report is like, nah, we just can't tell. It could have been either way. Ratcliffe gets in there. And within, as you said, within a day or two, they come out and say, oh, by the way, we think the lab leak is more likely. Well, on the one hand, great, thanks. I feel, I take it my Pulitzer's in the mail. But also this kind of the sense of like, all right, what should the consequences be? And, by the way, I should note that the CIA report back in 2021 did not find it suspicious that the Chinese were not cooperating in any way, shape, or form. And they did not take that as evidence that there was any chicanery, any shenanigans, or anything wrong going. In other words, they explicitly rejected the concept of a cover-up. It was, we haven't found anything. We haven't cooperated. That doesn't tell us anything. Whereas, Jon Stewart in his infamous, rant on Colbert, making his former coworker Colbert look really uncomfortable, pointed out that, how maybe the bat virus center had something to do with the fact that we're all infected with the bat virus. So anyway, I'm glad to see this. I'm frustrated. My sneaking suspicion is that this people at the Central Intelligence Agency, look, if I can do this, and I'm not that smart, people who are much smarter than me can do this and can come to the same conclusions. But if you tell President Biden, yeah, more than 1 million Americans are dead because of something China did, well, then he's going to have to do something about it. And nobody in the U.S. government wanted to deal with the consequences of that. That's my working theory here, folks. So good news, but a frustrating good news. But hopefully we're one step closer to actually being some sort of consequences upon the Chinese government for their, at minimum, absolute lack of cooperation, exacerbating the risk from this virus, and in all likelihood, setting off this entire pandemic through gain-of-function research. And oh, by the way, we should not let Fauci and everybody else escape the consequences for funding that I've heard the theory that this was a backdoor way of keeping track of what the Chinese were doing, which if it was, okay, but tell us. I don't think I think it's kind of ridiculous to, be clinging to that. We had no idea they were doing that kind of stuff in the labs. Yes, you did. So anyway.
I mean, we've got it point blank that the Chinese lied about human-to-human transmission for weeks. So the fact that they're, they don't think there was a cover-up, do you just take people's statements at face value? Is that what you're doing in the intelligence community? Because that's not really the job. So
this is why, amateur laymen like you and I can't understand. But the Chinese government is legendarily honest. They love to admit when they made mistakes. And they love to take responsibility when they've, set out a pandemic that killed millions of people.
Not even like specific on the record recriminations, not even like a loss of reputation in any way, shape, or form, it seems like. I mean, the Chinese, they get more questionable calls than the Chiefs.
An appropriate comparison for today.
All right, Jim, as mentioned, let's head back to Friday, which seems like about a month ago now. But Donald Trump, first of all, it was a two-stop day. He started at the White House, but then went to North Carolina, where he had another fascinating exchange, basically turned over his podium to residents who have been ignored since late September when Hurricane Helene went through and major flood problems and all sorts of other things, letting people name the insurance companies that aren't following through on their promises on the policies, which I'm sure the insurance companies loved. But hey, if they're not doing what they promised to do, they deserve that. Then he's off to L.A., not only touring fire damage, but meeting Gavin Newsom on the tarmac, and then having this amazing open roundtable with Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles. Rick Grenell is now Trump's point man on this whole disaster. He was sitting there as well. And other people were chiming in as well. But this is kind of an extended excerpt about letting people just go in and clean out their own property and get the process going to rebuild. Just fascinating to watch in real time.
We are going to move as fast as we can, but we want you to be safe. We want you to be back in your homes immediately.
But the people are willing to clean out their own debris. It doesn't cost a lot.
Yes, and they can.
You should let them do it, because by the time you hire contractors, it's going to be 2 years.
If a family...
The people are willing to get a dumpster and do it themselves and clean it out.
And they can.
There's not that much left. It's all incinerated.
That's right.
And, it's just going to take a long time if you do. You can do some of it, but a lot of these people, I know that guy right there that's talking. I know my people. You'll be on that thing tonight, throwing the stuff away, and your site it'll look perfect within 24 hours. And that's what he wants to do. He doesn't want to wait around for 7 months till the city hires some demolition contract that's going to charge him $25,000 to do his lot. Yeah. I think you have emergency powers just like I do. And I'm exercising my emergency powers. You have to exercise them also.
I did exercise them.
Because I looked, you have a very powerful emergency power, and you can do everything within 24 hours.
Yes. And if individuals want to clear out their property, they can. Well, yes, but you know that you will be able to go back soon.
Mr. President.
We think within a week.
That's a long time, a week. I'll be honest. To me, everyone's standing in front of their house. They want to go to work, and they're not allowed to do it.
And the most important thing is for people to be safe.
They're safe. They're safe. You know what? They're not safe. They're not safe now.
Jim, that was a tour de force. Obviously, some people are going to look at it and see different things, but basically calling out Karen Bass, who says you can go back now. Oh, actually, no, it's not safe now, but yeah, we think in a week. Do you think if Trump wasn't raising this issue, they'd be letting people go back in a week when everybody was telling him 18 months? So fascinating to watch. It's obviously said Biden could never have done that because he didn't do it, and we know why. But hopefully, most importantly, it gets the ball moving for people to get their lives back in order.
Never mind Biden. This is kind of a refreshing change from Brownie. You're doing a heck of a job. We can debate how much Brownie and FEMA deserve blame for Hurricane Katrina, but a tone of impatience, a tone of wanting to get moving as quickly as possible. Look, I realize, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass is a piñata right now. Everybody's taking a whack at her. In the corner, I just kind of went through the process for a recall. If you're signing that change.org petition demanding her to resign, I don't mean to poo-poo your, I get your sentiment, but that's not going to do anything. And I think it's pretty clear she's not going to resign. As of last year, she said she intended to run for another term, and her term does not end until 2026. So if you want to get rid of her before then, and I think that is more than justified right now, I walked through the steps. It's doable. You need 15% of the eligible voters to agree to that. That's about, 3/4 of the people who voted for Rick Caruso last time around, considering the level of public outrage. I think it's very doable. But it is very delightful to see, and I gotta say, as listeners know, a longtime critic of Trump, he's probably at his best when Trump, the developer, comes out. Greg, do you think he's had some frustrating experiences with getting lots cleared or getting something you're tearing down and all that stuff? When I see this discussion back and forth, whenever you see a rule that doesn't make sense and seems stupid, my suspicion is a lawyer was involved. No offense to the fine listeners of this podcast who are lawyers, but it's not safe. Okay, yeah, look, you've got a building that has burned to the ground, hot enough to melt refrigerators and dishwashers, and God knows what kind of fumes are there. God knows what kind of heat from embers, chemicals. It could potentially be dangerous out there. Karen Bass is not sufficiently neurologically charged to be able to say off the top of her head, Mr. President, if I do what you're doing, people are going to do it. They're going to inhale fumes. They're going to get some sort of health ailment as a result of that. Think back to the ground zero at 9/11, and you're going to end up having people getting health ailments because of that, and they're going to sue the city, which is it's a reasonable supposition of what could happen. So maybe you have to have everybody who's doing this sign a waiver and declare that they will not. They recognize the risks. They recognize that there's a risk. This is not. And also you're clearing wreckage. People could get hurt. So declare you're not going to sue the city and that you want to get into your property and you want to start putting stuff into a dumpster and you want to clear that ground so you can start rebuilding as soon as possible. That's very reasonable. But I notice Bass doesn't. It's not the synapses are not connecting there fast enough to recognize that's why they have this policy in place. I think it's still a bad policy. I think it's probably not a policy that is understandable or forgivable in light of the circumstances of this colossal disaster that has struck the city and the very understandable appetite. Look, first of all, first fires were on January 2nd. We're nearly at the end of the month, right? The fire, but also, by the way, fires are still burning. The fact that the national media stopped talking about this does not mean that the problems have gone away. But you've got vast swaths of the city, Pacific Palisades, et cetera, that have just been devastated. So people have been out of their homes and lost everything with minutes warning. Of course they're itching to get in there. Of course they're itching to start rebuilding their lives. And the more you're saying, well, we got to wait for this city commission to sign off on it. We got to wait for that city. You're torturing these people. So Bass's attitude, which she's getting a ton of criticism. And some of it is that she's a career legislator before she became mayor. And the sense that she's never actually run anything. And so she kind of has this nice lady, and people have said she kind of has treated the job almost like semi-retirement. Look, you can't, this is time. Chop, chop. This is the time to really kick into a higher gear. And if she can't do it, that's one more reason for that recall. But again, there's no reason for her to let the standard issue, well, we have to do this and we have to do that, and you have to agree with subsection A and subsection B, and all the usual red tape and bureaucracy that is in this case is utterly unacceptable. And, rarely do you see a president dunking on a local official like that, but in this case, it's entirely deserved.
It absolutely is. And you're totally right about the media. Of all the wonderful phrases and ideas that Rush Limbaugh came up with, I think the drive-by media might be the one that resonates most because it's a perfect example of it. Huge story. They come in, they're 24/7 on the coverage, trying to blame Trump a lot of the time, even though he hadn't been sworn in as president yet. And so then they realized, okay, that's not going to play. Oh, now we have an inauguration. Now we have things to be outraged about it somewhere else. And all these people are left without anybody paying attention to him anymore. So
yeah, it's not that there isn't other big news going on. We talk about other topics on this podcast. But for the people of Los Angeles, it's like, well, we got 4 days of coverage. And that 4 days of coverage really made Bass look bad, Newsom look bad, and the entire blue state model of governance look bad. And so very conveniently for Democrats, the media is losing its interest in this and saying, hey, are there any lessons that any other city in the country could take from this experience? No, we got to go, look, carnations. We're not going to have carnations by Valentine's Day. We're all going to have to switch to decaf.
What a start to the week. Jim, it's only going to get better. Well, it's not going to necessarily get better.
It's Monday. It feels like it's been a long week already.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast. If you don't already, tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. They're a huge help to us. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. And join us again on Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.